Assalamu alaikum, dear students. Today we are reading a book of class 8th, that is the history book of social science subject. And here today's topic is when people rebel, 1857 and after. It is chapter number 5, one of the most event in Indian history, the event of 1857. You know that the policies of the British that were ruling in India, which was the company, the East Indian Company, their policies affected most of the groups of people in throughout the India. The kings of small provinces, queens, peasants, landlords, tribals, soldiers, all were affected in different ways. People resist policies and actions that harm their interests to go against their sentiments. First of all, we will try to know about the kings and princes and or nawabs who lost their power during the company rule. In the early 19th century, the British, the company, adopted different policies in India. They continued the process of annexation and every sect of the Indian society affected by these policies. First of all, we will find how the Nawabs or the kings affected by these policies. In the mid 18th century, Nawabs and Rajas had seen their power erode. They gradually lost their authority and honor. Residents had been stationed in many courts. The freedom of the rulers reduced. Their army were disbanded, and their revenue and territories were taken away. So they became hostile to the company. Many ruling families tried to negotiate with the company to protect their interests. For example, Rani Lakshmi Bai of Jhansi wanted the company to negotiate to recognize her adopted son as the heir of the kingdom after the death of her husband. Likewise, Nana Sahib, the adopted son of Bajirao II, pleaded that he be given his father's pension when the latter died. However, the company, confident of its superiority and military power, turned down these pleas. In the same way, Oudh, one of the last territories to be annexed. It was important territory during this during British India. The Oudh, it was the last territories that were annexed in 1801. It was a subsidiary alliance was imposed on Oudh, and in 1856 it was taken over. The then Governor General, that was Dalhousie, declared that the territory was being misgoverned and British rule is needed to ensure proper administration. In the same way, the company even began to plan how to bring the Mughal dynasty to an end. The name of the Mughal king was removed from the coins minted by the company. In the same way, Governor General Canning decided that Bahadur Shah Zafar would be the last Mughal king, and after the death, none of the descendants would be recognized as the king, they would just be called the princes. So, these were the initiatives that were taken by the company against the Nawabs and the kings or princes during the course of time, that resulting the the distrust among the kings or rulers, local rulers. And the another is the peasants and the spies. You also know that in these times the peasants and spies were also affected by the policies. High taxes and rigid methods of revenue collection was imposed. Many failed to pay back the loans. To the lenders and gradually lost the lands they had tilled for generations. So the peasants lost their lands by the rigid methods of revenue collection and high taxation imposed by the company. In the same way, the Indian spies in the employ of the company also had reasons for discontent. They were unhappy about their pay, about allowances, conditions of service. Some of the new rules, moreover, violated their religious sensibilities and beliefs. In those days, Many people in the country believed that if they crossed the sea, they would lose their religion and caste. That is why they refused to go through the sea route to other country or other territory. In 1857-56, the company passed a new law which stated that every new person who took up the employment in the company's army had to agree to serve overseas if required. Sipais also reacted to what was happening in the countryside. So the anger of the peasants quickly spread among the Sipais. Response to reforms. The British believed that Indian society had to be reformed. Laws were passed to stop the practice of sati and to encourage the remarriage of widows. In English language, education was actively promoted. After 1830, the company allowed Christian missionaries to function freely in the domain and even own land proper and property. In 1850, a new law was passed to make conversion to Christianity easier. This law allowed an Indian who had converted to Christianity to inherit the property of his ancestor. Many Indians began to feel that the British were destroying their religion, their social customs, and their traditional way of life. There were, of course, other Indians who wanted to change existing social practices. You will read about these reforms and reform movements in chapter 7. This is all about today's lesson. In this lesson, in today's lecture, you have to remember some points that were the discontent that uprising among the Indians during the early 19th century. The policies of the British company affected most of the segments of the people of India. The Nawabs or the rulers or the kings affected mostly. They lost their power, authority, or honor. They also lost their armies. The peasants and the zemindars lost their lands by imposing high taxation and rigid methods in land reforming, and the Sepoys also were discontent by the service rules. So the important sections of the society were hostile to the British during this period. On the one hand, the Britishers tried to reform the Indian society under British laws, and they also encouraged the conversion of Hindus or Muslims into the Christianity. So these rules and laws were not accepted by the locals, and they feel insecure under the company rule. That is why the revolt of 1857 uprising in May, and you will read more about it in the next lecture. So today that is all for today. Thank you. Okay.